Howard League refer to in the report, which is a prescribed set of rules, if you like, on how to manage a secure children's home.
So, if what you were proposing wasn't regarded as appropriate, what was? Were there acceptable alternatives?
To the Grand Prix system?
Well, if your job description included introducing systems and methods to bring greenfields into line with UK national standards, and that wasn't regarded as appropriate, what would be regarded as appropriate?
Well, unfortunately, my experience up there when I first kind of started changing the policies, changing the practices, I was not offered alternatives as such. I was simply criticised for what I was doing, and it became a very difficult situation in a very short period of time. And at one point during a period of absence, the elements of the Grand Prix system were reintroduced, which was the initial period of 24 hours in the room.
So Greenfields opened in October 2006 then. How happy were you with the work being done up there until the Christmas?
I was very happy, actually. I think, it wasn't without its teething problems. There was an inordinate amount of work that needed to be done. Obviously taking over a building that was £5.5 million, a staff group that were coming out of what could only be perceived as an old farmhouse into state-of-the-art modern systems, modern procedures. So there was a lot of work. I was working in excess of 70 hours a week.
You were on leave for Christmas. Yes. And the behaviour management system, you say, was changed.
Yes.
How?
There was a note put in the communications book, which is a book that all staff read when they arrive on shift. So it's a very effective method of being able to ensure that all staff understand any information that needs to be told. There was a note in the book that said that as from today, all new residents, upon admission, will be placed in their rooms for 24 hours. And it went on to say that subject to good behaviour, and should there be any negative behaviour, then that 24 hours will start again at the point of positive behaviour.
So was the Grand Prix system instituted in full, or only the separation of those new residents for their first 24 hours?
Yes, pretty much, although there were some instances of young people actually being put in solitary confinement for, albeit a shorter period of time.
Now, the Howard League has said that they believe the Grand Prix system would be unlawful in England and Wales. In your view, was it illegal or simply against what you knew as good practice and perhaps current thinking?
In where you bear in mind, for example, Jersey law, is that what you're considering?
Well, did you think it was illegal? What?
Yes, absolutely. I think, yes, in the UK it was illegal, but I also think that it was illegal in Jersey. There is, for example, in the children's law Jersey, there is a section about child protection, and that puts the onus upon those responsible, in this case it would be the states, that children need to be protected from abuse.
Now, before we go any further, can you just clarify whether the Secure Accommodation Network's good practice guidance, is that binding in the UK? Is that legally binding?
It is as it suggests. It's good practice guidance.
So it's not legally binding?
It wouldn't be legally binding.
And in Jersey?
In Jersey, no. However, the point, I think, about these good practice guidance is that if you were to consider, in Jersey, my job description, it mentioned very clearly that, we needed to adopt national minimum care standards. Those good practice guidance are written from those national minimum care standards. So I would say, whilst it would be perhaps difficult to make it legally binding, all of the policies and procedures surrounding Greenfields meant that it should be enshrined in those policies and procedures.
So, to the best of your knowledge, is it a part of the policy concerning children in custody in Jersey that solitary confinement or single separation should only be used as a last resort and under the strictest of controls?
Well, the difficulty in Jersey, they don't have a rule book. But what they do have is they have specifications like job descriptions that say national minimum care standards. They do have a requirement, for example, for all social workers to be registered with the General Social Care Council. As a requirement of that registration, all social workers have to adopt best practice. So whilst they don't enshrine it in their laws, I think through what they are recommending, what they are suggesting is best practice, then yes, I think there is a responsibility there for them to uphold the practices that have been adopted in the UK.
Let's go back to your Christmas leave in 2006. You returned. Did you see the changed behaviour management system actually in operation? Because you're on record as saying that the system enforced during your absence, your words, could potentially involve locking a young person in a room, known as single separation, for over 36 hours. Now, are you aware that this actually happened?
When, on my return from the UK, my first day back, there was a young person who'd been admitted the night before. He'd, arrived the night before from the police station, and a member of staff actually said to me, "Simon, what should I do?" because quite clearly we have now been told that they need to stay in their room. And the member of staff was quite aware that that wasn't what I would agree to. And I had no choice but to say, well, look, you have to go by what you've been told in my absence. So on that day, there was a young person who was in the room for 24 hours, yes.
But not 36?
Well, the 36 hours is that should a child arrive the night before, then they would spend that night in their room, and then the following morning they would spend all day in the room, but then obviously because it's night time again, they would end up back in their room. That's how you would get 36 hours in your room.
So did you actually observe someone spend 36 hours in solitary?
That young person, because they didn't arrive the night before, late at the night before, they were in the room for 24 hours.
What did you do then? What did you do when you returned from leave and found the change system in place?
Well, this was on a Friday, and over the weekend I wrote a serious concerns complaint, which I then submitted to the Directorate Manager of Social Services and the Chief Executive of Health and Social Services.
Now, how and for what reason was your employment at Greenfields terminated?
Well, there's obviously two sides to the story here. The States of Jersey have...
What's your side? Let's see.
Well, my side of the story is...
Why do you think your employment at Greenfields was terminated?
I believe it's because I made a complaint.
Now, yesterday, Senator Vibert, the Minister for Education, Sport and Culture, said the regime at Greenfields and your concerns had been investigated. Were they?
There were a number of investigations commissioned, two of which were relevant to the Grand Prix system. One was investigated by the coordinator of the Children's Executive, and the other person who investigated it was the head of the Child Protection team here in Jersey. So there were two separate investigations. The conclusions to those investigations were that the head of the Child Protection Unit made no reference to the Grand Prix system whatsoever, not once in her entire report. The coordinator of the Children's Executive, in his report, in the findings of that report, he quoted that there is no evidence of an abusive regime at either the current or the former Greenfields.
What kind of investigation do you believe should have taken place?
Well, first of all, it should have been independent. I made it very clear from the beginning that I wanted an independent report. I wanted the Social Services Department to actually recognise that this was not possible to investigate it internally because of the potential prejudice of that investigation. They refused to do that, unfortunately, and as you can imagine, the coordinator of the Children's Executive ultimately is responsible for Greenfields. Later on, the coordinator of Children's Executive did actually make a comment to Professor Upex when he did his report that it was